or not so brief maybe, on the topic over here. The pasuk in Sefer Tehillim, in Perek Kuf Yutes, says, "Li'olam Adonai devarcha nitzav b'shamayim." Eternally, Hashem, your words are standing in the heavens. Lador vador emunosecha konanta eretz v'ta'amod. Throughout the generations, you are stable, and you have stabilized the earth. Right? This idea is that the very words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Ma'aseh Bereshis that we learn was the medium of creation, Vayomer Hashem Yehi Or, etc. All of the utterances of creation that the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah and Chazal and other places, they list, right, the Mishnah Maseches Avos, they list all of the utterances of creation. There are 10 utterances of creation. How exactly they're counted is a different story. There's different versions of how you count the utterances. But be that as it may, there are 10 utterances of creation. So those dvarim, those utterances of God, are suspended in the heavens. What does that mean they're suspended in the heavens? It means that is the medium through which all of existence is maintained. Right? Konanta eretz v'ta'amod, you stabilized existence. So the speech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu equals the stabilizing phenomenon of existence itself. That's what that means. Now, obviously, our dibur is not exactly like God's dibur, but the fact that the words to describe God's dibur and our dibur are the same is not a coincidence. It's not happenstance. It means that there are fundamental similarities between God's dibur and our dibur. And as the Ramban says in his introduction to Sefer Bereshis, that Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language. Why is it called the holy language? Because primarily it is the medium of God's creation. God's creative force is through Lashon HaKodesh. Right, there's the commentary of one of the Balei HaTosfos, the Bechor Shor, of Yosef Bechor Shor. He wrote a commentary on Bereshis. He's quoted many, many times through the Tosfos and Shas. In his commentary on Bereshis in Perek Yud Aleph, he says that the medium through which the people of the Dor HaPalaga, the generation that created the tower, their medium was the corrupted Lashon HaKodesh, that they understood the creative capacity of speech, and they were able to leverage that in order to manipulate all of reality. Today, we're coming to this realization from a more scientific perspective, because we can understand the manipulative power of speech. We can understand how these things can be used to wrest control of groups, of individuals. The power of speech is incredibly, incredibly vast. This is the idea of Lashon HaKodesh, creative speech that when you speak something, it creates something. Right? Chazal say in the Gemara in Erechim, right, they called Chazal's euphemism for Lashon Hara was Lashon Tlitai, the three-pronged language. Why the three-pronged language? Because it kills 3 people. It kills 3 people. One speech kills 3 people. What are the 3 people? The person who speaks it, the person who hears it, and the person who you're speaking about. Right? With one word, it's possible to cause incredible destruction. And b'midah tova, from the positive side, if speech is used in an appropriate way, has the ability to do tremendous good. Right? It's this very, very powerful medium. Right? Being itself was brought into existence through God's speech. We see that all of the creative potential, just like it was Kavayachol contained in God's creative capacity, was contained in speech. So too our creative capacity is contained in speech, and specifically in Lashon HaKodesh. Now, this book is not on Lashon HaKodesh in a general sense, but it goes into the weeds, so to speak. This book called Reish Milim is literally on the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And at the end of the alphabet, meaning we'll go from Aleph through Taf B'ezrat Hashem, after the letters comes the vowels. And so as we know, the Hebrew language does not have vowels, unlike Lahavdil, right? The English alphabet has both consonants and vowels. The Hebrew alphabet only has the consonants. So there's a separate section on the vowels. And then after the vowels, there's another layer of the ta'amim, meaning what we call the trope, right? The trope when we read the Torah in a halachic setting. So there's also cantillations, right? Notes. There you go. Right. That, I guess that's an accurate way to describe it. Right. So the notes are also very important because they hone in on the theme, the vibe. It's like right. It's literally the right. It's the soundtrack. It's literally that's what it is. If you're telling a story, there's what the actors are doing. There's also the music playing in the background, and there's appropriate background music and inappropriate background music. And the background music is very important. And that we're going into Ada right now. Right, my favorite example of this, it's a bit of a tangent, but not really, is what the Gra brings on his commentary to Sefer Esther, and he says that when it describes all of the women that were coming to Achashverosh's beauty pageant, so it says on all of the women, right, kol na'ara v'na'ara, every one of the women they came, right. So on that phrase na'ara v'na'ara. So the ta'amim is kadma va'azla. Na'ara v'na'ara. So kadma va'azla in Aramaic, what does kadma va'azla mean? Get up and go. That's what it means. Na'ara v'na'ara, they got up and went, meaning they were very enthusiastic. Very enthusiastic. But then when it describes how Esther went, so it's a very, very unique phenomenon, which to the best of my knowledge doesn't appear anywhere else in all of Kisvei HaKodesh. It is the tam munach 3 times in a row. Okay? Ve'agia, Torah Esther, Bas Avichail, Dod Mordechai. 3 times in a row, munach. What does the word munach mean? To stay put. To stay put. Meaning she was being dragged along, like totally against her will. Yeah? So we see that it's the background music. It's giving the flavor. So there's the words, right? And then there's the flavor of the words in context. So all of these strata of Lashon HaKodesh require understanding, because again, it's the generative capacity. There's one more nakuda on this general idea. There's a very interesting concept. Now, again, we're learning more about this from a scientific perspective. The relationship between thought and speech. Something that the linguists discovered almost 70 years ago. People probably heard the name Noam Chomsky around here. Probably the context is probably not such a good context, because unfortunately he's not a very good friend of ours. But the reason that he became so famous is because he's the father of modern linguistics. He made tremendous contributions to the area of linguistics already from the 50s. He's been around forever. So one of the things that Chomsky discovered, which to the best of my knowledge is still agreed upon, is that human beings are born with cognitive hardware pre-wired already to speak. Now, it doesn't just mean that we have a tongue and lips and different organs that we're able to speak. It means that the cognitive capacity to speak is already there. It's like a spider, right? The spider didn't learn how to spin a web. It didn't go to web spinning college and get a degree, right? After 4 years, it was already ingrained in the. You pay, right? They did observations with small children, right, up to the age of 2. Okay, you can see that naturally children they're expressing all of the different ranges of sounds, even not in their own language. Like in English, there's no guttural sounds, for example. But if you listen to little babies that are born in New Jersey and Texas or whatever, they're like experimenting with all these different with the guttural fricative and the whatever, all these weird sounds that don't appear in English. Eventually, that becomes socialized out of them because there's no application. Yeah, but in theory, all of the ranges of sounds are there. Yeah, there's a very, very powerful idea. This is something that's brought about specifically in Torah's Hasidus and specifically in the Torah of Chabad, in the Hemshech of the Rashab of the 5th Rebbe of Chabad, in Hemshech Tarnat. So he speaks about the idea of osios hadibur, right? The letters, right? The prerequisite, so to speak, the cognitive prerequisite of speech, how it is lifnei haseichel. It's even before the intellect. And in light of what we just explained, it's literally this idea that the potentiality for speech predates your conscious cognitive capacity. Meaning before you even start thinking about something, the potentiality to articulate something into speech, it predates that. It's even a more primal aspect of the human consciousness than intellectual, front brain thought itself. There's a very, very deep layer of human consciousness, the ability to articulate. And the place that we find this spoken out in Lashon, right, spoken out, no pun intended, so spoken out in Lashon HaKodesh is a fascinating phenomenon, that the word to articulate and the word to think logically are the same word. Which word is that? We say this at least 3 times a day, this word. Hegeh. Hegeh. The word hegeh, the shoresh hegeh, hey, gimel hey, that word means both to articulate and it means to think. Yehiyu l'ratzonim refi v'hegion libi, the thoughts of my heart. Right? The thoughts of my heart should be pleasing to you, O God. Yeah? On the other hand, we find other times where this word is explicitly referring to speech. Right? Pi tzadik yehegeh tov. The mouth of the righteous will be mehegeh, right? Will express good. Yeah? Uvahem nehegeh yomam v'layla. By Torah, right? We're going to articulate them day and night. Yeah? The word to articulate and the word to think are the same. Why? Because this is all on the same spectrum. All on this, right? It's all on the same linear spectrum of articulation. Articulation, it starts in the deep recesses of the consciousness, goes through the conscious mind, and is then spoken out with the klei adibur. That things are created through speech. So, right, something's created through a dibur, and it creates a davar. A dibur creates a davar.
Right.
It's the same thing. And one last nakuda before we jump into the actual text. In Lashon HaKodesh, there are 2 primary words to describe speaking. One word is the shoresh aleph mem resh, amar vayomer, and one is what we were just saying a second ago, dabar, dibur. In creation, we have the asara ma'amaros, the 10 utterances, 10 times that God said vayomer. Later on in history, there's another set of 10 utterances, but they're not called asara ma'amaros. They're called the aseres hadivros, or as the pasuk says, aseres hadivarim, right? The divarim. What's the difference between a ma'amar and a dibur? What's the difference practically? So the Gra says a fascinating thing, very, very profound thing, that vayomer is just the act of speaking. You could be vayomer in an empty room, but dibur means that there's someone listening, someone receiving what you're saying. You can't be medaber in an empty room. You could be vayomer in an empty room, but you can't be medaber in an empty room. So in creation, there was no one listening. There was no one to listen yet. There was asara ma'amaros. Right? Later on in history, when God now has an audience, it's the aseres hadivarim. Aseres hadivarim. It depends if the thing is being received or if it's not being received. Yeah, we say this, by the way. This is alluded to. I told this to guys in yeshiva. This is alluded to in the semi chazaras hashatz that we say on Friday night. Right, Magen Avos bidvaro, mechayem esim b'ma'amaro. Why? Because if they're dead, they're not listening yet. Right? Right. With God's dibur, he's magen on the right. He protects the forefathers, and with his ma'amar, he revivifies the dead. It's the start of a process when there's no one listening yet. So. Oh, so I said this is the last Nakuda, but this is really the last Nakuda because this has to do with the actual book itself. Rav Kook is a very, in my opinion, and this is not just my opinion, and this is a lot of people that I've spoken to about Rav Kook in general. I sat in Merkaz Harav. I had the merit of sitting in Merkaz Harav for 3 years. I learned very, very little Rav Kook, almost nothing. And Rav Kook is very, very inaccessible in general. As a rule, he's very inaccessible. Why is that? Because he's writing basically in poetry. Now, why is he doing that? He didn't do it on purpose so that people wouldn't be able to understand what he's saying. He didn't do that. The reason that he wrote in the way that he wrote is because he was speaking about things that were at literally the edge of perceivable consciousness. And I mean that in the most literal way that you right? Even for him, meaning wherever he was at like the very edge, the very, very edge. And I know that because there are other things that he wrote. There are some stories that are actually quite clear. If you look in Ein Hayah, for example, just as an example, Ein Hayah, which is his commentary on the Agados of Brachos and Shabbos, much easier to understand, much clearer, much more simpler language, right? But a book like Orot HaKodesh, which is known by the Talmidim of Rav Kook, the Orot HaKodesh, the 4 volumes of Orot HaKodesh, which are themselves edited, by the way, they're not like the originals, right? They're edited from the manuscripts. But the Orot HaKodesh are the gold standard, so to speak, of Rav Kook. So you open up a page of that, it's like someone literally describing a dream. It's like the most that they could, right, the most clarity that they could bring of having that type of peak experience. So it's difficult. It's difficult to access. And if as a rule Rav Kook is difficult to access, Reish Milin is, as far as I know, this is like this is l'chulei alma. Everyone holds this, that Reish Milin is the most difficult. It is. It's the most difficult of an author that is already exceedingly difficult. So as we're going to see, the paragraphs here, they're very difficult to understand. Right? I'm just throwing that out there. Right? Luckily, each section on each letter is not particularly long. We're talking about a paragraph, maybe 2 on each letter. So the Seder Halimud that we'll have, right, and actually going about this, which we'll jump into Os Aleph in a minute, we'll read it. We'll do the best that we can to at least follow the flow, okay? And then we'll jump into the commentary over here from Rav David, which in my opinion is very, very good. It's actually quite short. It's not like a lengthy commentary. It's good springboard for being able to flesh it out and discuss. All right, so this will be the Seder Alimud. So I don't know if we know of any specific motivation for this book in particular. Something that was done very, very well by the author of this commentary from Rav David is that he actually brought the sources that Rav Kook is referring to. Like as a general rule, Rav Kook doesn't quote sources in his writings, just doesn't quote things. He's just speaking in prose, similar to the Rambam. Right, exactly. He tends not to quote things. A very interesting phenomenon about this book in particular is that a primary source for this was the Pardes Rimonim of the Ramak, of Moshe Cordovero. It was a primary source. A primary source for Rav Kook writing this was, right, and from specific sha'arim, from Sha'ar Chav Gimel, Sha'ar Chav Daled, right, from that area of Pardes Rimonim, he drew a lot of inspiration. Obviously, it's not the sum total of all the content, but many of the letters at least bring something from the Ramak. There are also very clear references to Rabbi Nachman, which we'll see. It's actually an Os Aleph is a really good example. Maybe we'll get to that. So he doesn't quote it, but the person that compiled this commentary actually brings the section from Torah Yotes. Maybe we'll have a goal of getting there and finishing off for the night. So, okay, Ha'aleph me'ir banu. Ha'aleph me'ir banu es ha'machshava shel hareishis. The Aleph awakens within us the thought of the firstness, Reishis being the generative capacity, ha'aschala ha'keduma, the primordial beginning. Onut sofim es gadlusa, we are witnessing its greatness, meaning the greatness of this generative capacity. Vehenenu mishtomimim al yikras chazyona, and we are aghast, we are like petrified in its splendor. He omeres lanu omer sela la'akshiv lilmod la'alef. And what is the awe of the message of this first generative capacity? It's telling us to listen and to learn. Why listen and learn? Because the word aleph means to teach. Like everyone here, I'm sure, went to Ulpan at some time, right? La'alef, right? Like from the pasuk in Mishlei, a'alefcha bina, I will teach you understanding. The word aleph, as we're going to see, this probably was also kedai to highlight in the Hakdama. Something unique about Lashon HaKodesh, about the Hebrew alphabet, is that all the letters in Lashon HaKodesh mean things. They mean things, right? It's also the numbers, by the way, that numbers in Lashon HaKodesh also mean things, which is a different discussion. But the word aleph means to teach. That's what it means. So there's another connotation of that, which means like high above, like aluf means a chief, or in the military context, a general, right? Yeah. Ha'ulpan ze targum halimud. The word ulpan is the Aramaic for limud, for study. Yodas hi haneshama shekol haba b'limud eineno mikori. The soul knows, okay, and by the soul he's referring to the deep inner recesses of the consciousness. It knows that anything that comes through learning is not original. Eino mikori. Mikori hu harayon apnimi she'eino mevuta. Something that is original is the innermost rayon, the innermost concept that cannot be expressed. Shahaya yiyeh nachlas ha'olam biyom hagadol she'ish es achiv ve'ish es re'eu lo yilmedu od ladas es Hashem. It is a hearkening to the time where a man and his brother or a man and his friend will not learn, lo yilmedu, they will not learn to know God. Exactly. So this is a pasuk, as Rabbi just pointed out. This is a pasuk from Sefer Yirmiyahu. No, as we all gave fair warning that he's going to quote a lot of things without the citations. I know that there's a big problem nowadays with our academic milieu, but yes, he's quoting. Yes, nachon. The pasuk in Yirmiyahu says that there will be a day where a man and his friend or a man and his fellow will not learn about the knowledge of God. Why? Because the knowledge of God will permeate all of reality, so no one need to learn it. So Rav Kook is saying, what does it mean like to learn as opposed to know? Learning means that I'm trying to take information that's already within me and generate it outward. Okay, like express it outward to someone else. So even assuming that you understand exactly what it is that I meant, your understanding is not original. It's coming from me. I had a thought. I'm giving it over to you. Right? It could be that the thought that I'm giving over to you isn't even my original thought. It could be that I heard it from someone else. Right? The originality by definition, and this is a very profound idea, originality by definition is something that can't be expressed. Can't be expressed fully. So says Rav Kook, this prophecy of Yirmiyahu is saying that there's going to be a time where people won't need learning. They won't need learning in the classic sense. They'll just know. They'll know by just in a state of being. They won't need the linear let's say communication of one person speaking to another person. It'll just be knowing.
Originality can't be expressed.
It's like subtle communication, right? It's like the person's eyes said more than their words type of thing, right? It sounds very cliche, but we all know that it's true. The tone and the body language and all these subtle forms of communication can be much more powerful than the words that people speak. So what does this mean? It's not expressed. This is the Aleph. The Aleph doesn't have a sound. The Aleph doesn't have a sound. The Aleph is expressing the original, the pre-verbal awareness that isn't expressed. It can't be expressed. By definition, it can't be expressed. So the Aleph doesn't have a sound. All it can do is carry a vowel. That's its function. It can carry a vowel, but it itself isn't expressed. I think that there are ways. I think that's what he's saying. It's like there is the medium of limud that I articulate to you in a very left brain fashion. I describe very technically what it is that I'm talking about, and you can understand that. That's one form of communication. But there's another form of communication of me describing my experience, which is kind of like the gap of the blind man with color, because it's a gap of experience. And still, what he's saying is that there will be a time where people can communicate that depth of experience. It's not going to be through limud, because you can't articulate experience through technical words, right? Through compartmentalized words, you can't. Maybe you can articulate it in other ways. Maybe you can articulate it through a glance, or the shuddering of the eyelids in a certain way, right? Or how you move your arms as you speak, right? These very, very subtle ways of communication. But that's what he's saying. The prophecy of Yirmiyahu is saying that there will be a time where the knowledge of Hashem will not be through limud. It won't be through teaching. It'll be through just knowing, right? It'll be at the level of the Aleph. He's saying it can't be expressed It can't be expressed using technical language. It can't be expressed using compartmentalized words. That's what he's saying. He's saying it has to be that there's a resonance between the two communicators in order so that an original idea can be expressed. Two people have to establish a rapport and a deep relationship in order so that will happen. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, "Ein adam omid al das rabo ela achar arba'im shana." It takes 40 years for a student to really know what his master is teaching him. I learned that from the Jewish people in the Midbar. That it took the whole Midbar experience for Jewish people to really understand what Moshe was trying to tell them. Saying in order for two people it takes a depth of relationship for two people to develop the rapport that their inner experience is being communicated. He's saying that the full essence of the thing is never expressed through words alone. The words are there in order to get you in the start of the process. This is worth citing something right now. You see, I knew that we would get into this. This is every line here is just so potent with with potential. There's a very well known agada in the towards the end of Maseches Nida that people are familiar with, I'm sure. It describes the experience of the fetus in the womb. Right? It describes what is going on. Right? That right? It's folded over, and right, its physiology is the exact opposite of the physiology of a born person, etc. And it says that in the womb there is a state of consciousness that is called Yodeas Kol Torah Kula, that he knows the entire Torah. There's a state of consciousness that's achieved there. And before the child is born, Ba Malach V'Sasra Al Piv, there's an angel that comes and strikes it on the mouth, and through that strike, through that trauma, it forgets the whole Torah. So the Maharal asks, why is it that the strike on the mouth makes the child forget the whole Torah? Usually if you want to say something, well, he got hit on the head and forgot everything, right? Like, what's this Sasra Al Piv? So says Maharal very profoundly. He quotes the Midrash Rabbah and Bereshis Rabbah. Also, it's relatively relatively known midrash. Ein kol esev ve'esev she'ein bo malach shemakeu v'omer gadol. That every blade of grass, meaning every creature in the world, has an angel that is striking it and telling it to grow. So what does that mean? It means that the growing impetus of every creature is called the angel comes and hits it. The angel, meaning it's the metaphysical side of its existence that's coming into it and telling it, now you have to develop and grow. So when the angel comes and strikes the baby on the mouth, what does that mean? It's telling the baby that its power of speech needs to develop. And through its ability to speak, it forgets the Torah.
So that it could develop it itself.
Yes, that's the end goal.
Time.
But we understand. But the point, for the purposes of this particular point, is that when you traverse from the nonverbal state into the verbal state, it causes a disconnect. It causes a disconnect from the state of nonverbal consciousness.
It's the source and all the
Yes, exactly. Now, a theme that will be a running theme throughout the Sefer is that we want to be able to live in both worlds at the same time. We want to be able to live in the world that is inarticulable, can't be spoken out, and to be able to speak at the same time. We want to be able to, right? This is the sod, Rabbi. This is the secret of what it means that Moshe had difficulty speaking. He says, "Kvad pe kvad lashon hani," that I'm not a person that speaks. This is what it really means. Doesn't mean that he had like an injury at birth like that. That Midrash Gufa is explaining this point. That's a different conversation. But the point is that the reason that Moshe had difficulty speaking, because he had difficulty speaking. He was living in a place where you can't describe what's going on there. You can't articulate what's going on there. Now, through Moshe's journey, through having to lead the Jewish people and having to be in a position of leadership and instruction, so he developed the capacity to kind of describe what it is that's going on in his mind, right? Which is a skill in and of itself. You can't just say, "Oh, my thoughts are so lofty, so I'm just going to shut up." Right? No, you have to try the best of your capacity to develop the tools to be able to, right, describe yourself, to express yourself.
But you're losing something when that comes out.
Oh, so hopefully not. Hopefully you can get to a point where the words, your words are so powerful and so rich that they contain within it the full depths of what it is that you're trying to say, which is how we understand the Torah itself. Right, prophecy is right, are words that are rich with potentiality. Like the Gemara in Baba Basra on Daf Nun Beis, if I'm not mistaken, says, right, misnabim ve'enam yodim ma misnabim. Right, the prophets, they prophesy, they don't even know what they're saying. Like, they don't even know the full extent of what it is they're saying. They're just saying the words. And generations of students are unpacking the significance of those words that the prophets themselves didn't even know. Anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but these are themes that we're going to come in contact with throughout the Sefer. Excuse me, I lost the place. Right. Right. That's the end of that pasuk. That there will be no more need for people to learn about God, because they will all know me, from the smallest of them to the greatest of them. Again, talking about a time in history where we've surpassed the need to articulate with words. We just know from a very deep place. I think that there are ways of accessing this even now, and he's gonna start getting into this a little bit, perhaps from a slightly different direction. But Chazal already make this very, very clear in their instructions on proper spiritual practice. At least twice in Maseches Avos, we have Rabbi Tarfon And he says, Kol yomai yisi bein hachachamim, all of my life I was by the wise. V'lo matzasi laguf tov yoser mishtika. I never found anything better than the body other than silence. Right, shtika. And later on I believe in the second parak, we have Rabbi Akiva, right, siag lechachma, shtika. That the thing that guards wisdom is silence. Meaning, there are practices that we have to be able to access this. It's interesting. This is a slight tangent, but I think it's important just to be able to delve into the concept. These are very, very high concepts, obviously, right? The shofar is the mitzvah that highlights the traversing between these two places of reality. Because the shofar is called a kol, right? Kol shofar. It's a mitzvah, right? Lishma kol shofar, to hear the kol shofar. But it's not verbal. It's not words. It's just the kol, right? Like the pasuk in Yeshayahu, kra begaron al tachsoch. Call out with your throat. Do not hold back, right? Kra begaron, not kra bapeh with your mouth. No, kra begaron with your throat. What's calling out the throat? Is right. It's just unintelligible crying. Right, which is what the shofar is. The shofar is just kol. It's just the right. It's that state of mikori, silent consciousness. Right. It's the traversing from that mikori, silent consciousness to the verbal. It's the thing that holds space between. If a person can access that, then hopefully the words that they speak will actually be an authentic expression of the mikori, of the authentic inner recesses, and not just empty words, which are most of our words are. A story I heard many years ago, I forget who told me the story, that one of the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, he was sitting in his shiur, and he told him, it's a segula, to get whatever you want, if you go 40 days without saying any extra words, like any extraneous speech. 40 days of extraneous speech, you can get whatever Yeshua you want. So he comes back to the Baal Shem Tov after 40 days. He says, "Listen, I was in a Tainus Dibor for 40 days. I literally didn't say anything, right? For 40 days, I didn't get what I wanted." So he said, "Well, did you say Tehillim after davening?" And he said, "Of course I did." He said, "Oh, well, that was your Devar B'Telem. Like that was your right, this guy, right? His Tehillim was just like he was just saying it because like everyone was doing it, so like he did it." Right? It wasn't right because it wasn't authentic. It was like Devarim B'Telem. Right? So to this extent, to make sure that every word that we say, it's obviously a very, very high aspiration. But to get to the point that every word that we say is at least an attempt. It could be that it's a failed attempt, but it's at least a conscious attempt to express something authentic, as opposed to just being empty, right? Word salad. Of course, the most immediate application of this is for short tefillah in Chelik Gimel of Mar Nevuchim at the very, very end in Gimel Nun Aleph. So the Rambam gives a very detailed prescription of how people are meant to progress in their kavanas tefillah. He says that the process takes several years. He says, listen, you start off with brachos, and then you focus on that for a few years, and then you can go to Kriya Shema, you focus on that for a few years, right? There's
gotten used to it.
There's a tshuva in Pe'er Hador, right? The tshuvas of the Rambam that people wrote to him saying that we have a problem in shul. What's the problem? People aren't paying attention in Chazaras Hashatz. Right? They're just, they're not paying, right? They're spaced out, or whatever. So he gave them a psak that you should not do silent Shemona Esrei. Do only Chazaras Hashatz. And that way, people will be yotzei with Chazaras Hashatz, and they'll have to pay attention. They'll know that if they don't pay attention to Chazaras Hashatz, they won't be yotzei. Rav Kapach's shul right over here. If people don't know, Rav Kapach, right? He lived in this community for his whole time in Israel. He died about 20 years ago. His shul is still here. The Yemenite shul on what is that? Right, on Amin Sapir. They still do that to this day.
It's crazy.
You go pray there. They don't do silent Shemona Esrei. It's worth it to go just to see it. It's very interesting. Right now, I take issue with that because I think it's clear from the context that this psak of the Rambam was a context based psak, right? I think that's clear. But be that as it may, the point is that right, the words are meant to be a very, very deep from a very, very deep place of concentration, to the point that if you can't do it, you're really not supposed to pray. That is literally the halacha, and I'm not exaggerating. The Gemara in Eruvin tells us that there were Amoraim that would refrain from praying for days without praying at all, because they were not, he got back from a trip, or he was sick and he got back up, right? It's like it took them a while to do it. We've undermined that whole thing because we say, well, we're not going to have kavanah anyway, so you might as well like with these very difficult to let's say in certain makaros, there are certain makaros that imply that we should undo that. I take very strong issue with those things. I think all of the major Rishonim from the Rambam to the Rosh, they quote the Gemara. A person doesn't have kavanah, right? They have to repeat Shema Esrei. If a person knows ahead of time that they're not able to have kavanah, it's forbidden for them to pray. Forbidden. Right? These things are like very, very serious. Yeah. So obviously, what we're trying to do is get to a point where we become hyper conscious of the words that we're saying, and again, not knowing like all the drushos of every commentary on the siddur, and that's neither here nor there. I would think, on the contrary, maybe it's not good to be thinking about all the different perushim running through your mind while you're davening, right? I'm talking about just having the consciousness that you have that the words that you're saying are actually designed to be expressions of the inner recesses of your consciousness. And the reason we have all the the long hakdama until Shemona Esrei, right? We have and even at Mincha you have the karbonos, you have ashra, you have something to kind of lead you into that. Right? Just to get to that place is very difficult. Again, the place being that you are conscious of the fact that the words that are coming out of your mouth are an expression of your inner experience. And that takes at least 2.5 minutes to get to. At least you can't to run into shul and to get into Shemona Esrei. It's like you've lost. It's completely lost. Right? I mean, we're talking about like real avoda, right? It's called avoda shabalev, the work, right, the service of the heart. In the Gemara and Tanis, right, it calls it avoda shabalev for a reason, because this is the avoda, right? And the most basic level of the avoda is this nakuda, is knowing that there's an inner experience which is not going to be expressed verbally because it can't be expressed verbally, but to just be aware of it, right? To hone in with it, to commune with it, to be conscious of it, and then from that place attempt to speak. Right? We're talking like that. That's like entry level. Entry level. And from there we could learn, the deeper explanations and the kavanos of Chazal and the different psukim that they're referring to and all that, right? But basic level is just to be there. And again, it takes at least 2.5 minutes from the time you walk into shul and the time when you step into Shemona Esrei. This is the aleph beis, right? The alphabet as he explains it is very much a progression. And it's not just like disjointed ideas, right? It's very, very much a progression. And in fact, he opens up beis that after we've learned about the aleph and all of its significance and what it stands for and what it symbolizes, now we traverse, we segue into the beis, which is this concept, right? Where are we? Again, I lost the place. Sorry, right? Halimud hu targum. Halimud, right? The act of learning is always an act of translation. Okay, achoreim shel hapanim hamachshavim, the back side, so to speak, right? The other side, like the back of the head of the face of thought. Lo ha'aras hanishmatit ki'im tardema. It is not the actual awakening of the soul, but rather what's called a tardema. A tardema is a slumber. A rare word in Lashon HaKodesh that appears, to the best of my knowledge, only twice in the Chumash. Extra points for anyone who knows the 2 times.
I know the first one.
You know the first one. No, that's the second time. Adam Arishan. Right? Adam Arishan. By Adam Arishan, he falls into a tardema. And by Avram, he also falls into a tardema. Tardema means it is a sleep. It implies something like radum means inactive. It's like switching off, something like, right? Yeah, something like that, akin to that. Like the person's completely unresponsive. Tardema. So teaching. He says something very, very powerful in relation or relative to the inner experiential awareness. Again, the awareness that is not able to be articulated in speech. In contrast to that, so limud is like a tardema. It's like being awake is being aware of the inner experience, and being in a coma is trying to speak it out. It's like that level of gap between the two. Very, very strong language. Zosi Toras Horos Ha'alef Bishmo. This is the teachings of the Aleph in its name, meaning the fact that the letter Aleph is called Aleph. right? Aleph being to teach, right? It's the call, so to speak, as he phrased in the beginning. Ki omeres lanu, the call, so to speak, of the Aleph is telling us la'akshiv lilmod la'alef, to be cognizant, to listen, because we're going to enter now into teaching. So the Aleph is just the call to be ready to listen. It's not the actual teaching. It's just the call to be ready to listen. Bitui akarov la'alef hamispari yavi osanu lachshov al das madregas hamispar hariviis. So it's a bit difficult to translate this literally. This is actually a complicated sentence. The enunciation of the Aleph in letters comes to give us the progression of the let's say the different decimal points in the progression of numbers. Yechidot, right, like the one column. Asiriot, 10. Meot, hundreds. Alafim, the thousands. Now, why is that? Because Aleph means one, but it also means 1,000. Aleph, right? So the one, it means like the beginning and also means the end. It has this connotation of like the smallest number and also the biggest number.
You also have Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Pei, Sofit is 400, or say 800, and then you have Aleph, which is 1,000.
Right, exactly. That's what he's trying to say. Yeah. Bituyo, meaning like to enunciate the word Aleph is Aleph, Lamed, Pei. Correct. Yeah. Hayigayon hachatum, hayigayon hamachshavi. Okay, so he's saying these four categories of the ones, the tens, the hundreds, and the thousands are referring to four distinct categories of cognition. There's no way we're going to get that. This is like the worst place to end off with, but we'll just. No. Yeah, the four categories. It doesn't get any easier, but at least I feel like we had at least some closure with the last concept. Now he's jumping into like this very complicated thing. Let's just read the next couple of lines, because Rabbi Shem will at least leave us something. I don't know if it's good to go into davening with these thoughts. Everyone's going to be distracted. So these four categories are ha'igayon hachatum, cognition which is sealed, okay, meaning it's as some aspect of inaccessibility to it. Ha'igayon hamachshavi, the beginning of conscious thought. Ha'igayon hamiluli, which we would call the ability to articulate, miluli, like words, okay? Vayigayon hanishma, and cognition for something that you hear. Halimud yavo b'maracha hariviyit. Limud, again, this concept called limud, where two people are exchanging information through speaking, okay? That dynamic takes place in the fourth maracha, meaning the maracha of listening, of listening to words that people are saying. The point that he's making, and again, we'll go into this B'ezrat Hashem deeper when we get to the Perush, but the point that he's making is that this is already four dimensions removed from the Mikori, like from the original thought. It's already four dimensions removed. That's why it's like he calls it like being in a coma versus being in awake. Yeah. Talimud yavo b'marachas haravis b'igayon hanishma, in this cognition of listening, b'chriyat ha'oznaim, opening up the ears, madrega haraviit, which is the fourth level, shiribuya hu miuta, that its manyness is actually its limitation. Yeah. So even though we're able to speak lots and lots of words, yeah, it's actually a limitation, because the more words that you're trying to say, really, the further away you're going from getting to the essence of the thing. The more words you have to say, it means the harder it is the more you're struggling with expressing the innermost idea. So I'll give actually a serious answer to what you said, because even if a person, for one reason or another, is not able to pray, there is an importance of showing up to a Beis HaKnesses, just showing up, right? The Rambam says this in Hilchos Tefillah, in Perek Hay, if I'm not mistaken. He says that even just sitting in a Beis HaKnesses, just sitting there and not doing anything, is like a mitzvah. He actually uses that word, right? It's a devar mitzvah. How does he know that? Because it's a pasuk in Tehillim. Ashrei Yoshvei Beisecha. Fortunate are those who sit in your house. Just sit. Just sit. And that has halachic applications, by the way. If a person goes into a shul, you're not supposed to go into a shul for no reason, like just to go in and out. You're not supposed to use a shul as a shortcut, right? That what's the minion factory on Zarei Chama, right? So you could go, right? You can go into like the back alleys of Makor Baruch through the shul. So you're really not supposed to do that. Unless it's Shkia.
You won't make it to the other side.
Right, exactly. You won't make it to the other side. Right. So you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to use a shul as a shortcut. So if you walk into a shul, you're supposed to do something there. So what's doing? Says the Rambam, even sitting. Even just sitting for a moment is considered doing. It's considered a mitzvah to sit in a shul. So even a person is incapable of davening for one reason or another, right? On Purim, this could be very practical, right? A person, just got out of their suda and they're still drunk. They can't daven, but they need to be mashal minyan. So it's a good thing to do. Right? Just to sit. Huh? What if you talk? Oh, so that's already right. Yatsa scharo be'efsedo. There, a person, God forbid, is discussing dvarim b'telim in a shul. He's mezalzel in the sanctity of the place, then obviously he's only doing damage by doing that. The practice is to be aware that the words that I say are an attempt to express an inner state of awareness. That's all. So even if I have the words in front of me, maybe it makes it easier because I don't have to think about the words as you're saying. I think that's the distinction that you're making. You're saying in a regular case where I have to actually come up with the words by myself, so there's this added layer of difficulty because I have to come up with the words. Whereas by tefillah, I don't have that difficulty because I already know the words I'm going to say. Still, this particular layer that we're talking about of just being aware of the inner experience, being aware of that, and knowing that the words are an attempt to express that, that's regardless of whether you have the words or not. You can have a whole script ready to be read out, but to go and retreat back to that inner state and be prepared to express from that inner state is regardless of whether you have the words. You could have the words. It's still you need to do that preparation in order to be able to speak from that place.